I was standing there, in the mud, watching the Virgin Mary raise her hand and stop the earth from collapsing on my house. I know how this sounds. I know many people will think I was delirious, that fear made me see things that weren't there. But I was there. My wife was there. My 3 sons were there. And we all saw the same thing. The image of Our Lady emerged from the shrine, floated into the muddy backyard, and with a simple gesture of her hand, created a barrier that saved our lives. This happened 15 years ago, but even today, when I look at that hardened wall of earth that's still there at the bottom of our backyard, I feel a shiver run down my spine. Let me tell you from the beginning. My name is John, and at that time I was 32 years old. I lived with my wife, Mary, and our 3 boys in a small adobe house at the foot of the Cross Mountain in rural Minas Gerais. It was a simple, humble life, but we were happy. I worked as a ranch hand on a nearby farm, and Mary took care of the children and a small garden we kept in the back of the house. We didn't have much, but we had enough, and we had faith. Our house was small, only 3 rooms, but there was something special about it. In the corner of the main room, my grandmother had left a hand-carved wooden shrine with an image of Our Lady of Grace. It was a simple but beautiful piece, and every day Mary lit 2 candles there, one in the morning and one at night. The children were in the habit of praying in front of that image before bed. It was our ritual, something that gave us peace. I've always been a man of faith, but I wasn't the type who went to church every Sunday. My religion was simpler, more intimate. I talked to God when I was in the field, taking care of the cattle, or when I looked at the stars at night. I believed He was there, in everything around me, but I had never expected a miracle. I had never thought that one day I would be the protagonist of a story like this. On Thursday night, when I got home from work, I found Mary in the kitchen, looking out the window towards the mountain. She was pale, her hands trembling. "What's wrong?" I asked. She pointed towards the mountain. "Look up there, John. Don't you see?" I looked, but I saw nothing but the low fog and the trees swaying in the wind. "I swear I saw a strange light climbing the slope," she said. "A light that wasn't lightning, nor a flashlight. It was different." That night when we went to bed, Mary insisted that we all pray together in front of the shrine. It wasn't unusual, but there was something in the way she held my hand, as if she were asking for special protection. The children, Peter, 8 years old, Lucas, 6, and little Anna, only 4, knelt on the cold floor of the room and began to pray the rosary. I watched that scene, feeling a mixture of tenderness and inexplicable anxiety. It was during the prayer that something happened that intrigued me. The 2 candles that Mary had lit in the shrine began to flicker, as if there were a draft in the room. But all the doors and windows were closed. There was no wind inside the house. The flames danced from side to side, casting strange shadows on the wall. Mary stopped praying and looked at me with wide eyes. "Do you see?" she whispered. I was seeing, but I didn't understand what was happening. On Friday, the weather closed completely. The sky turned black even during the day, and the rain began to fall with an intensity I had never seen before. Large drops pounded on the tin roof of our house, creating a deafening noise. I missed work because it wasn't even possible to leave the house. The 5 of us stayed inside, waiting for the storm to pass. But it didn't pass. It only got worse. Throughout the afternoon, I heard a strange noise coming from the mountain. It was as if someone were rolling large stones down the hill. Occasionally, a louder bang would make the house tremble. "It must be some tree falling," I said to Mary, but she shook her head. "No, John, that's not a tree. That's the mountain moving." At the time, I thought she was exaggerating, but later I understood that she was right. Around 10 o'clock at night, I decided to peek outside. I opened the front door just a crack, and that's when I saw it. The water coming down from Cross Mountain wasn't just water. It was a mixture of mud, rocks, and branches, creating a kind of murky river that was circling our house. The yard was completely flooded, and I could see that the situation was becoming critical. "Mary," I called, trying to stay calm, "I think we should get ready for a possible evacuation." But when I tried to open the door completely, I couldn't. Something was blocking the passage. I forced it more and realized it was a large tree trunk dragged there by the flood, now wedged against our door. I tried pushing through the kitchen window, but there was debris blocking that exit too. We were trapped. That's when despair started to take over. I looked at Mary and the children, who were huddled together on the sofa, and felt a shiver run down my spine. If the situation worsened, if the house couldn't withstand the pressure of the water and mud, we wouldn't be able to escape. For the first time in my life, I felt the real fear of death. Not just my own, but the death of my entire family. Peter, my oldest son, noticed my apprehension. "Dad, we'll be okay?" he asked in that sweet little kid's voice. I forced a smile and said yes, that everything would be all right. But inside, I was terrified. How could I protect my family if we couldn't even get out of the house? It was about 1 in the morning when we heard the crash. It wasn't just any noise. It was like a freight train passing right next to our house. The ground shook so hard that some dishes fell from the kitchen shelf and shattered. The children started to cry. Mary looked at me with tears in her eyes. "John, what's happening?" I didn't know how to answer. All I could do was hug my family and try to seem strong. But inside, I was praying like I'd never prayed before in my life. "My God, if you exist, if you're listening, please protect us. Don't let anything happen to my family." It was a desperate prayer, the kind that only comes when you're truly afraid. The noise continued for a few minutes, as if the mountain itself was collapsing. And then, a terrifying silence. Even the rain was silent. It was as if the whole world had stopped to watch us. I looked out the window and saw that the water had risen even higher. It was already nearing the threshold of the back door. It was Mary who suggested that we pray together in front of the shrine. "Let's ask Our Lady of Grace for protection," she said, with a conviction that impressed me. I, who was almost panicking, felt a strange strength in my wife's words. We all knelt there before that simple plaster image and began to say the rosary. Looking back on this moment now, 15 years later, I realized that was the most sincere prayer of my life. They weren't mechanical, memorized words. Each Hail Mary that left my lips was a desperate plea for help. The children prayed along, their trembling little voices mingling with the sound of the storm outside. And Mary, my dear Mary, prayed with a faith that seemed capable of moving mountains. And then, something happened that changed my life forever. We were in the middle of the prayer when a soft light began to emanate from the shrine. At first, I thought it was just the reflection of the candles, but I soon realized it was something different. The light was white, almost silvery, and seemed to come from within the image of Our Lady herself. Mary stopped praying and whispered, "Do you see that?" We all saw it. The children stopped crying and stared, mesmerized. The light grew more intense, and then, I know this is going to sound impossible, but I swear it's true, the image of the Virgin Mary began to move. She floated out of her wooden niche and hovered in the air, right in front of us. It was the same image that had always been there, but now she was alive, translucent, radiating a peace I had never felt before. The Virgin was dressed in her usual sky-blue robe, but now it seemed to float around her. Her hands were outstretched towards us in a gesture that reminded me of a mother protecting her children. Her eyes, which in the plaster image were just painted, now had a human depth, a compassion that touched me to the core of my soul. I was there, paralyzed, trying to process what was happening. Part of me wanted to believe it was just a hallucination caused by fear and exhaustion. But there was something so real, so tangible about that presence that I couldn't doubt it. It was as if she were really there, in the middle of our living room, sharing that moment of despair with us. The apparition lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. And then, without saying a word, the Virgin began to move toward the back door. She passed through the wall as if it were made of air and disappeared into the muddy yard. We all stood in silence, looking at the place where she had been, unable to believe what we had seen. It was Peter who broke the silence. "Dad, the pretty girl went outside." I didn't know what to say. How could I explain something to a child that I myself couldn't understand? But before I could say anything, we heard a different sound coming from the backyard. It was like a whisper, or perhaps the flapping of giant wings. And then another crash, but this time it wasn't scary. It was as if something very heavy had fallen into the backyard, but in a controlled, deliberate way. Mary got up and went to the back window. I followed her, and what we saw left us speechless. The mud that was invading our yard had stopped completely. Not just stopped, it had changed direction. Now it was being diverted to the side, creating a kind of channel that bypassed our house. It was as if an invisible hand had built a natural barrier to protect us. We spent the rest of the night awake, watching from the window. The storm raged on until dawn, but our house remained dry and safe. The mud continued to flow down from the mountain, but now it followed a different path, as if there were an invisible wall protecting us. I held Mary's hand, and we both stared at that surreal scene, unable to utter a word. When the sun rose on Saturday morning, the rain finally stopped. I managed to push the log that was blocking our door and went out to see the damage. What I found left me even more impressed. All the land around our house was destroyed. Fallen trees, rocks scattered everywhere, deep furrows in the earth where the mud had passed. But our house was intact, like an island in the midst of that devastation. Looking closely, I could see that a perfect channel had formed, diverting all the water and mud away from our house. It wasn't natural. The edges were too regular, too precise. It was as if someone had deliberately dug that channel. And at the end of it, where the mud was deposited, there was a small precipice that I had never noticed before. But what impressed me most was a wall of hardened earth that had formed at the back of our yard. It was as if someone had piled and compacted the wet earth, creating a solid barrier almost 7 feet high. When I touched it, I felt it was as hard as stone. It didn't feel like ordinary earth. It felt like something that had been purposefully molded. The neighbors started arriving around 9 o'clock in the morning. First came Mr. Anthony, who lived on the neighboring property. Then Mrs. Rose, who lived up the hill. One by one, they came to see how we had spent the night. Everyone was amazed that we had survived. "You were blessed," said Mr. Anthony, shaking his head. "Look at all this mess, and your house didn't have a scratch." It was true. All the other houses in the area had suffered some kind of damage. Mr. Anthony's roof had been pierced by a branch. Mrs. Rose had to spend the night in the bathroom because the rest of the house had flooded. Mr. Manuel, who lived at the top of the hill, lost half his yard to erosion. But our house, which was right in the path of the mud, was perfect. I didn't tell anyone about the apparition that first morning. I didn't know how to explain it, and I was afraid they would think I was crazy. But Mary couldn't contain herself. When Mrs. Rose commented on the channel that protected our house, Mary said, "It was Our Lady who saved us. She appeared here in our living room and went outside to make this protection for us." Mrs. Rose was silent for a moment, looking at Mary with an expression that mixed surprise and skepticism. But then she said, "You know, Mary, I don't doubt it. My mother always said that when the situation becomes very critical, when there is no more human hope, that's when the angels appear." And then she recounted that she had also seen a strange light on the mountain during the storm, but thought it was lightning. Gradually, the story spread throughout the region. People came to our house to see the channel and the hardened earth wall. Some came out of curiosity, others came out of faith. I realized that our experience was touching something deep in people's hearts. Many arrived here disillusioned with life, carrying their own burdens and sufferings, and laughed with a different expression on their faces. If you are watching this account and have identified with these experiences of faith, I would like to invite you to subscribe to our channel. Here, we share real stories of people who have lived extraordinary moments, episodes that remind us that there is something greater than ourselves taking care of our lives. Your subscription helps us continue to bring these testimonies to more people who, like you, seek signs of hope and purpose. But back to my story. A week after the storm, we decided to transform the corner of the prayer room into something special. With the help of some neighbors, we built a small wooden chapel where there was only the image before. Mary painted on the walls, with her own hands, a representation of the Virgin Mary raising her arms over our house, protecting it from the mud and stones. It wasn't a professional work of art, but it had a sincere beauty that touched the heart of anyone who saw it. The news spread beyond our community. People from neighboring towns started coming to see the place where the miracle had happened. Some brought flowers, others left lit candles. Some came just to pray, and others came seeking their own graces. I remember a woman who came from Belo Horizonte carrying a picture of her son who was hospitalized with a serious illness. She prayed there in our chapel for hours, tears in her eyes. Mary dedicated herself completely to welcoming these people. She made coffee, listened to their stories, offered words of comfort. I discovered a vocation in her that I didn't know existed. She had a special gift for dealing with the suffering of others, an ability to convey hope even to those who arrived here without any faith. I watched her talk to the visitors and felt proud of the woman I had married. The children were also deeply impacted by all of this. Peter, who was 8 years old at the time, became a more thoughtful child, more sensitive to the feelings of others. He liked to help his mother receive the visitors, and he had a special way of dealing with the other children who came with their parents. Lucas developed a particular devotion to the Virgin Mary, and every day after school he spent a few minutes praying in the chapel. And little Anna, who was only 4 years old when it all happened, grew up believing that miracles were normal things in life. I myself changed a lot after that experience. Before, I was a man who believed in God, but in a distant, almost abstract way. After that night, my faith became something concrete, tangible. I knew there was something sacred watching over me and my family. This gave me an inner peace I had never felt before. Even in difficult times, and there were many after that, I always remembered that night, that protective presence, and found the strength to continue. A few years later, a priest from a nearby parish came to our house to officially investigate what had happened. He talked to us for hours, asked detailed questions, examined the place where it all happened. I don't know if he completely believed our version, but he gave us his blessing and said that, regardless of the explanation, it was evident that our family had been protected by something beyond human understanding. What most impresses me, even after all these years, is how that experience continues to bear fruit in people's lives. I receive letters and messages from people who visited our small chapel and say they found here what they were looking for. Some found healing for illnesses, others found strength to overcome family crises, others simply found the peace they had been seeking. Today, when I look at that hardened earth wall that still remains in the back of our yard, I get emotional. It remains there, firm, as a permanent reminder that we are not alone in this world. It is a silent testament that there is a greater force watching over us, even when we cannot see it. Mary often says that we were chosen to be instruments of this message of hope. I don't know if we were chosen or if we were simply in the right place at the right time with our hearts open to receive that grace. What I do know is that that experience transformed our life into a mission. To show people that miracles happen, that faith can move mountains, literally in our case, and that we should never give up hope. Sometimes, when I am alone in the backyard, looking at the mountain range, I wonder why we were the ones chosen to live through that experience.
Why not Mr. Anthony, who has always been a more religious man? Why not Mrs. Rose, who dedicated her life to charitable works? Why was a simple family like ours blessed with such an extraordinary miracle? I think the answer lies in simplicity itself. Perhaps miracles happen precisely to ordinary people in ordinary situations to show that the sacred is within reach of all of us. You don't have to be a saint. You don't have to be special. You just need to be open, sincere in your faith, and trust that even in the darkest moments, there is a light that can guide us. 15 years have passed since that night, and I am still the same simple man as before. I still work with cattle, still live in the same humble house, still have the same concerns as any family man. The difference is that now I know with absolute certainty that I am not alone. I know that there is someone taking care of me, my family, all of us. My message to you who are listening to this account is simple: don't give up your faith. Even when everything seems lost, even when you feel there is no way out, keep believing. Keep praying, keep trusting, because I can assure you, based on my own experience, that miracles happen. They may not happen in the way we expect, in the time we would like, but they do happen. And maybe, who knows, you too will have your own extraordinary experience to tell. Maybe you too will be chosen to witness something that goes beyond human understanding. When that happens, don't be afraid, don't doubt, just accept with gratitude this grace that is being poured out on your life. I end this account with the same feeling I have every day when I wake up and see that hardened earth wall in my backyard. Gratitude. Gratitude for having been chosen to live that experience. Gratitude for the protection I received. Gratitude for the opportunity to share this story with you. Because I believe that this is what we should do with the miracles we receive. Share them so that more people can find hope and strength to keep moving forward. The mountain stopped that night. The mud changed course. The Virgin Mary came out of the oratory and came to protect us. It happened, it's real, and it forever changed my family's life. May it change yours too.